tell me who you're looking at in the pictures.
Yeah, well, the one on the far left, that's Run DMC. That's a photo I took in 1987. Next one is LL Cool J. It's his first ever press photo. Then you've got Big Daddy Kane, Salt and Pepper, and Chuck D and Slick Rick.
So were they all photographed for the same publication or different?
No. Run DMC, that was a press photo shoot for them. LL Cool J, his first ever press shoot, 1985. Big Daddy Kane was photographed for my first ever hip-hop book that I was doing in 1991. Salt and Pepper is part of a photo shoot I did for them when they came out with the song Push It. It was for the album cover and posters. Chuck D was for Melody Maker, British newspaper. And Slick Rick we photographed for the same book, which was my first ever hip-hop book, which I did with writer Bill Adler, who was the press officer at the time for Def Jam Records. And we were going to put Slick Rick on the cover with his chains and his crown. He's incredible. He's reckoned to be one of the greatest of all time rappers. But unfortunately, a couple of months after we took that picture, he shot somebody and was incarcerated, and our book publisher didn't want to put someone in jail on the book cover. So we ended up getting the magnificent Big Daddy Kane. And,
not a bad replacement.
Not a bad replacement, no.
Hello and welcome to In Talks With. I'm Danielle Radoichin. The clip you heard there was from today's guest, Janette Beckman, the photographer who, since the 70s, has documented youth culture in street scenes on both sides of the Atlantic, often capturing musicians such as Dr Dre, Pete Townsend and Paul Weller just before they hit the big time. Captivated by street style, her photojournalism has caught everything from punks and rockers in London to the gangs of East Los Angeles. Janette grew up in London and spent time as a youth working for some of the most preeminent music and youth culture magazines of the day, such as Melody Maker and The Face. In the 80s, she moved to New York, where she still lives today, and built a career documenting the nascent hip-hop scene there. A career working for major magazine titles and prestigious subjects followed. More recently, she has spent time in Paris photographing the Christian Dior collections, as well as recording Black Lives Matter demonstrations. She exhibits prolifically and has published several books, and recently she took part in a talk at Photographiska in New York celebrating women in hip-hop. I spoke to Janette at the Pilgrim, a small hotel with a rock and roll vibe tucked away near Paddington Station, to hear about the photos she had on display there and her life as an itinerant female documentary photographer. The exhibition, which is in the stairwell, a lot of the photos are from an earlier period.
Yeah.
When you were still in London.
Yep.
And a lot of it's photographing punks. It looks like most of it's in London. But do you want to pick out one of them to talk about? Which one's your favourite?
I mean, a lot of these punk photos are obviously, they're not musicians, they're just punks or mods or whatever, because at this time, it was like the late 70s, early 80s, very early 80s, and there were just all these crazy youth cultures going on in England. There's punks and mods and rockabilly, and I don't know if you can really identify. I mean, that's Tracy Thorn, but she was in a group called the Marine Girls.
And you photographed Tracy Thorn, and that's the Marine Girls in London, 1981.
Yeah.
Where is that? I don't recognise.
It's in Tooting Bec.
Oh, right.
I lived in Streatham, and the Marine Girls, and I knew they had this fountain and a swimming pool, so I'm very literal. I was looking for some water in South London, and we found this. It was so great. I mean, they're so natural, and I don't really pose people. I like people to just be who they are. I think this is in the National Portrait Gallery now as part of their permanent collection.
Have you seen the new one since it opened?
I just went there, and they have my picture of the selector in there. I was like, that's a dream come true for me, because I grew up in London, and I would always go to the National Portrait Gallery and look at portraits. I mean, that place has sort of led me to become a portrait photographer because I love portraits. So it was
congratulations!
a real
I
thrill.
knew you had something in there.
Yeah.
You have a few pieces in there, don't you?
Yeah. They just bought during the pandemic. They bought, I think, 3 or 4 pieces. So it's exciting.
Do you miss London?
I miss London sometimes, but being in New York so long. I've been there since 1983.
So you grew up in London, North London, right? Then you went to, after uni, I think you went to Central St Martin's.
Yeah, I went to St Martin's and I went to what's now the LCC.
And then you went to New York.
Well, yeah, and I sort of came out, did some teaching, worked for Melody Maker and Face.
So were you always interested in music, or how did you end up going down that avenue?
I always loved music. The thing, I went to a school called King Alfred School. I was there from the age of 3 to 17, and I just always knew I wanted to be an artist of some sort. My mum was quite artsy. I used to go to little painting classes with her when, in the evening she's had her weekly painting class, and I used to tag along. And so yeah, I think I just, and I always loved music, and I don't know, I think I started listening to, well, obviously music was kind of rubbish on the radio, sort of, well, the Beatles and the Stones. I was a Stones fan. You had to be either a Beatles or a Stones fan back in the day, so I was a Rolling Stones fan. And then my first concert, well, I saw the Beatles once when I was really young.
Where did you see them?
At the London Palladium.
Okay.
But it was just fun. My cousin was having a birthday and we had these tickets and we went to see the Beatles. Everybody was screaming. I didn't know why they were screaming. It was just funny. I kind of liked the Beatles, but then when I turned to the Stones, it was just so much more interesting. And the first concert that I really went to, on my own as an adult, was the Rolling Stones in the Park when Brian Jones died, that free concert.
The one in Hyde Park?
Yeah. And my mom was like, "You're not going," and I'm like, "I'm going." It was my first sort of.
How old were you?
I can't even remember what year it was, but it was definitely a moment where my mum was like, "You can't go out looking like that." I had holes in my jeans and I was wearing flip-flops, whatever. It wasn't what I was supposed to look like. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be a rebel, I'm going to go." It was amazing. It was
really hot weather. I've seen in the photos
really,
it looked like it was
hot day.
Yeah.
And I went with a friend and it was just mobbed. It was packed, and I just remember Mick Jagger prancing around on stage in this little kind of white dress thing, and then he released the Doves. It was just fabulous. It was an amazing concert. I was a huge Rolling Stones fan, and Brian Jones had died, and it was a big deal. So, yeah, it was great, and I felt like it was definitely my first act of, I've got to move out from home. Anyway, so I ended up going to arts. I went to St. Martin's. I remember coming out of art school and I got a job teaching in the Kingsway Princeton School College, and Johnny Rotten, but he wasn't Johnny Rotten, had just left, and we didn't know that he was going to be the Sex Pistols, but I was teaching all these kids photography.
Wait, he just left?
Well, he was just there. It was a sort of sixth form college, I guess. And so there were a lot of punks there and a lot of kids who were squatters. And I was teaching them how to make prints in the darkroom and giving them projects and stuff. I was just working there a couple of days a week and working in the youth club in Streatham, which was called Chestnut Lodge. And there were just all these, there were punks and mods and rockabilly kids and two-tone kids, and music was just booming at that time.
So remind me how you ended up going to New York.
Oh, right. Well, I guess I have to tell you, so I was teaching in the college, And I was taking photos, street photos, and this and that and the other. I'd gone to America with my mom and photographed, a lot of Americana things, neon signs and incredible cars and things. And one day I walked with my portfolio into Sounds. It was a weekly music paper. And I met this woman, Vivian Goldman, she's a brilliant writer. She's written books about Bob Marley, and she's doing one on Fela Kuti's artist right now. She's just amazing. Anyway, she just said, "Oh, I like your photos. Do you want to go and photograph Susie and the Banshees tonight?" And I'd never photographed a band before. So I was like, okay. And I went and did it. I figured out how to go to the Roundhouse and take photos in a live concert. It wasn't easy. And I had a little dark room on Neal Street on the 3rd floor. And it was in the roof. There was a hole in the roof. We had a bucket because it was always raining. Water was coming through the roof. I went and I developed the film. I went back the next day with these prints, and she's like, "Oh, these are good." And she gave me another job. And sooner or later, I was doing 2 or 3 bands a week. And then Vivian, who's a writer, and I both moved to Melody Maker and started doing more and more work. And then the Face magazine started.
Yeah. So you were being commissioned by the Face to do quite a bit.
I was.
Back in the UK as well.
Yeah. In the beginning, that picture of the Islington twins ran in the first issue of the Face as a full
Explain
page.
what the photo of the Islington twins is.
The Islington twins, I met them when I was teaching in this college. One day I came out at lunchtime, there were these 2 incredibly, impeccably dressed guys standing in the schoolyard. And I had my camera and I just went up to them and said, "Do you mind if I take a picture of you?" And we started chatting. It turned out that we lived on the same street in Highbury. And so I took maybe a roll of film, 12 shots of them. And I just loved the way they looked. They're identical twins, and they were dressed identically. The first shoot I did with them, they were wearing? They were wearing these long parkas. They were wearing lokes, sunglasses, trilbies. They just looked amazing. And so I photographed them, and then a few years later, in 1980, I think, whenever it was, the Face magazine came out, and that ran as a full page in the Face, and I wrote a little something. I'm not a writer, but I wrote a little something. And they became very well known in the neighborhood, and they, at one point they were dancing on stage with Madness, and then by Highbury Islington train station, there was this thing called the Bar, and it's just a bar that went across outside the train station, some road thing, and they would go there every day with a boombox and entertain the commuters when they came off work. They're really famous. There's a big article about them. It was in The Guardian a while ago. And so a couple of years later, I went and photographed them again outside the garage where they were living in Highbury New Park. And we just became friends, and actually we're friends to this day. And I'm in London now. I'm probably going to go photograph them again. I usually do. They're amazing in their style. I mean, they're just known to be like unbelievably.
What are their names?
Chaka and Dubem. And their mom, I think, was from Nigeria. But they're just kind of great guys. And when we had the opening here, they came to the opening. And everybody sort of knows them. People were going up, "Oh my God, it's the Islington twins. Can I talk to them?" I was like, "Go ahead and talk to them. They're great." And then I did a lot more for the Face. I went to, festivals in Coventry and photographed all the not just the bands, but the fans, because I always love to photograph the fans, because I'm super interested in style, street style, really, more than specifically fashion. I mean, and years later, Dior commissioned me to do
that was a few years ago, right?
There was I think the first one was 2017 when Maria Grazia took over, or maybe 2016. She loved all my punks and mods pictures, so she brought me to Paris to photograph her first collection, or
the first collection she did for Dior.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, I'd never had a job like that. And it was amazing. The first day I got there, they were like, well, you have to meet with Maria. So I go to meet with Maria. And she said, well, what do you want to do here for a week? And it just popped in my head. I want to photograph the making of the collection sort of backstage, like I'm backstage with a band. So everything. So I ended up photographing the model go-sees, the tailors sewing the sequins, you know, the arranging of the show, everything. I was just, 24/7. I had access, Stephen Jones making the hats. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the show and the after show and everything.
And where did the photos appear afterwards? Was it for a campaign? Or?
It was really for a campaign for her. And I did everything in black and white. And I was working with her PR company, the press office, the head of press for her. And I kept going up to him and going, Sebastian, I really need you to come and look. We were doing digitally. And come and look and see, am I doing it right? I was there for 7 days with my friend Gudrun Georges, who was helping me. And he was like, oh, I'm too busy. I can't look. The very last day, after everything, after the show, after she, she was showing the buyers the collection, Sebastian just came up and whispered in my ear, we love everything. I was like, thank God. It's kind of crazy. But she also hired me again a couple of years later to photograph her next collection, 2000. It came out 2019, in the streets of London, where I'd photographed all these punks and mods, which was amazing, in Kentish Town. And that was a huge thing. It was amazing.
How do you find photographing in digital as opposed to non-digital?
In the beginning, I was very resistant because I loved to take photos. I loved going in the dark room. I loved printing. It's the whole thing.
Process.
And yes, and I didn't love sitting on the computer, period. But I have to say now, it's brilliant.
Oh, really? You come around to it?
Of course. I mean, it's amazing. You do a shoot with somebody you've just met, maybe for their album cover. And I just did a shoot for a guy. He's a kind of R&B guitar banjo player, incredibly. It's for Smithsonian Folkways label. I don't know this guy. He's a really nice guy. Comes from my house with his instruments, and there's no like art directors or anybody there. So I just check a few photos of him, put them in the computer, pull them up, go, what do you think? What do you think of this one? That one's really good. And we're just looking at them, and then after that he goes, yeah, actually, I like this. I'm looking good. Because, people are nervous getting their photos taken, and it's great. It starts a conversation, it makes them feel good. We used to do it with Polaroids, but I'm now, when I do photo shoots, if I'm doing digital, I kind of like to work with the artists and let them edit. So when you do a photo shoot with an artist for an album cover or something, that's going to stay with them for the rest of their life. Me, it's a job, and it is staying with me for the rest of my life, but not, there's also something else coming tomorrow. So, I want them to be happy.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to collaborate, and I like to photograph people. The whole point of doing portrait is to capture, who they are at that particular moment. Not my idea of who they might be, but who they actually are. So if they can be part of the process, which digital is amazing, they're part of the process as it's happening. I think it really works.
Thinking about developing a rapport with the people you photograph, how do you go about that? Because you photographed some people who are really well known and taken really successful images of them. Do you have a technique for putting people at their ease?
I think just in general, whether people are well known or whether you're just, photographing the mailman or whatever. Treat people with respect is the most important thing. Be friendly, be kind.
Do you tell people how to pose?
No, I really try not to. I will, I like shooting stuff outside the best. I really love daylight. I think it's the most beautiful light. So for me, if somebody's got a big shadow going over their face, I'll move them somewhere. But I don't really like telling people how to pose. I think it's better to let people rearrange their bodies so they don't feel awkward.
Have you ever had any problems with has anyone ever been really tricky to photograph?
Honestly speaking, everybody wants to hear the bad
stories.
Come
on, who's been a diva, who's been a total nightmare, who's been rude?
Well, this is the thing. Honestly, it's crazy. All these years, and I've been with dirt bike riders in Harlem, gangs in East LA, rodeo riders, all sorts of crazy places, and places maybe that people would consider dangerous, going to the Bronx in the 80s and all of that. Never had any problems. NWA never had any problems. They were just always people.
You never had any problems photographing NWA, you mean?
No, but you would think, people, oh, you're going to Chuck D, blah, blah.
Tell me the story for this podcast. Tell me the story about
I'll tell you the one story. I will tell you one story. In all these years, I was doing a shoot for Nickelodeon of Bill Cosby. And I really admired Bill Cosby. There was this series when I was growing up called I Spy. And he was the hero in it. And obviously, he was like a very well-known celebrity. But he was incredibly rude on the shoot and obnoxious. And it was actually for Nickelodeon. He had a cartoon series called Little Bill. And I was doing the poster, and he'd approved these certain poses that he was going to do. And it was an all-woman crew, woman art director, woman makeup person, me, a woman assistant. And he made us wait for 4 hours in the boiling heat while he's just over there chatting to his friends and having lunch. So we were already kind of pissed. And he gets on the set, and I was like, and we were told we had to call him Dr. Cosby. So I'm like, okay. Dr. Cosby, here's the picture of the pose you said that you wanted to do. And he just looks at me and he goes, I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And he strikes this crazy pose. He goes, did you get it? And I was like, okay, I'd done one click of my camera. It was film. Then he went, okay. And he did 10 more poses, like wild like this. And then he just walked off. And I just thought it was unbelievably rude. And it's a shame because, I'd always admired him, but he obviously didn't have much respect for this all-women crew. And I was just like, okay, that's one hero down.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I know you must get asked this a lot, but as a female photographer, have you found that to be an advantage or a disadvantage?
Honestly, when I went to New York to photograph to document hip-hop, as a young British woman, it was an incredible advantage. Everybody was like, oh, you ain't from here. What are you doing here in the Bronx? And then I'd go, well, I'm from London. And people didn't really travel then. Nobody had money. So they were all intrigued. What was this little, small British woman doing? Why were they even interested? And it was great. And we'd start conversations. And people were really kind to me. And I'm quite chatty. Being chatty, that's another good thing for taking photos. And yeah, I really didn't have a problem as a woman. I think there were probably assignments that I was lost because they didn't want to send a woman.
Oh, really?
Maybe, yeah, for certain things. But I didn't really think about that. I had more trouble here, working for Melody Maker when I was like sort of an art school student, and I'd come into Melody Maker meeting dressed in a madness, fuck up, let's dance t-shirt and pajama bottoms and Converse, and they were like, oh, I forgot to get dressed. They would just treat you like some little, art school idiot because they were all these rockers. I think I had more trouble with that, to be honest. I just gave a talk at Photographiska in New York because we just had a big hip-hop show there, and they asked me to think about a talk, and we decided to do something about women in hip-hop. And because of the climate and everything. So got my friend Lisa Cortez, who's amazing, by the way. She did, if you haven't seen it, there's a documentary about Little Richard that she just did that's...
Oh yeah, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
I think you can stream it on Netflix or Amazon right now. It's so good. Anyway, so African-American woman, she started as an intern at Def Jam and she ended up running the place, and now she's a famous documentary photographer. I had her, our other friend April Walker, who's Puerto Rican fashion designer. She clothed Biggie and Tupac and everybody back in the day. Her brand's still really vibrant. Vicky Toback, who just did she did the first kind of really famous hip-hop book called Contact High, which is great. And Debbie D, was one of the first female rappers even before Salt and Pepper, and me. And we were just all sitting on the stage. Place was packed, and for some reason nobody said, God, it was terrible, we had such a rough time with men. We just didn't do it. I don't know why. And we came up with the end of the thing. Somebody asked, well, what should we do as young women, in the industry? And Lisa said, well, you've got to find your tribe, find people you want to work with who are like-minded. And then April was like, follow your North Star, follow your passion. And Debbie said, you just got to be persistent, just keep going. And I thought those 3 pieces of advice were so perfect. People were crying in the audience. It was like, it was just a moment. And I think you just have to keep going. Like, if you really believe in what you're doing, try not to think of the adversities. Just think of the positive.
It's so nice, yeah. And as someone who's always, you've been at the forefront of youth culture, documenting youth culture for a while now. Do you think it's changed for the worse, for the better? Like, what's your attitude towards that?
Well, I think, just as we were saying, social media makes it a little harder, but then it also makes it easier. I mean, someone can, you want to be a photographer, you have your phone, you take a picture of something really cool, and people can see it in China and Russia and around the world in 1 minute. I mean, that's just, that was unimaginable back in the day. So I think in certain ways, it's really brilliant. And I just think people need to learn how to edit and know what's good and what isn't good. But
are you still into fashion? Do you think people still have a sense of style in the way they used to? Or do you think that internet culture's homogenized everything?
I think street style is forever. And, I still see people on the street. If you go up to 125th Street in New York City on any given day, you're just going to see the most amazingly dressed people. And sometimes, the homeless person around the corner, there's a homeless lady Nadine, who's outside my local Whole Food on Houston. And she's just every day dressed so beautifully. She's so stylish. And I think, back in the day, she wasn't homeless, and maybe I don't know. But, I just totally think that you see incredible things on the street. So,
what about the vibe in New York? Because you live there, now, and you've lived there since like
83. Yeah.
And we know all the stories about how it's changed so much, and everyone left during the pandemic and haven't come back, and you can smell marijuana on every street corner now that it's been legalized there. And what's still good about New York? What should people go and check out if they're there? And go check Graffiti, obviously a good one.
Yeah, I actually am a huge fan of the Museum of the City of New York. It's a very people don't really think about it. It's on 103rd and 5th. It's very easy to get to. You should go up there because they have an incredible show now about New York City. And it's huge, and it's it's photography, it's paintings, it's artifacts, and they have this amazing, it's very hard to describe, film section with all about films from New York, and you have to spend at least half an hour in there. It is incredible. And I'm a big fan of that museum, and my friends who have this DJ Misbehavior and Operator M's do outdoor dance parties there in the courtyard. should check those out. You should definitely look and go online and see what vinyl nights are doing. I have my hip-hop photos at the Seaport. They're like in storefront windows. They're about 8 foot high. They look amazing. And we're going to be doing some, DJ parties out there too on the street. That's really cool. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think New York's, it's really trying hard to come back from the pandemic. I mean, my neighborhood was totally boarded up because of the looting.
Which is?
I live just above Houston Street. It's sort of between the East Village and the West Village, above Soho. Mm. And it was crazy. I mean, but things are coming back. A lot of stores closed, but a lot of things are opening. And I just think, people are out trying to reinvent New York. So it's still cool. But you're right, everybody is stoned on the street. I mean, everybody I know is like smoking weed and eating gummies like no tomorrow.
All right.
Someone told me that when you go in Starbucks, the baristas can't get your order right because they're so stoned. But I don't know. I still think New York has flavor. I mean, go to Coney Island. It's always fun. Go there on the weekend. You see everybody, especially, that's really good. And you can just go there on the train. I mean, New York's exciting. There's just something, if you just walk around on the streets, it changes block by block. And there's just always stuff happening. So,
thank you so much for talking to me. I love this chat.
Was that good?
It's very good.
You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Redoitjen. The sound and theme music is by Waugh Productions and the artwork is by Patrick Waugh. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. Please subscribe and leave a review. To pitch for guest ideas, you can DM me via my socials at Danielle Redoitjen. Thanks for listening.